We are excited that Java is back, aren't we? And it's probably because it means we have choice. There's more than just the thump now to think about. There's a beat. But even back then in the golden ages when Java and RE went head to head, the Java stood for something different. It stood for a smaller, lighter, more agile motorcycle that was more young at heart. But what does Java stand for today? And the time is now to get a taste of the Java. The question that we need to answer is this really the option everyone has been looking forward to, hoping for? And can it be all of that while staying true to its roots? To find out, we spoke a bit with the ancestor we showed you earlier on with the help of a translator, Team Zig's own Czech Java lover, Alan De Cruz.
This little beauty is a 1967 250cc Java, which my father bought, well, brand new in 1967. And as I grew up, the one thing that always struck me about this motorcycle is how beautiful it looks. I mean, the proportions are just about perfect, in my mind at least. This large tear-up shaped tank, the wide flared arches on the mudguards, and well-rounded edges almost everywhere. They always look just so pleasing. Starters being the engine. It's an exposed engine, but you see very few cables running from it. And even the handlebars had the throttle and electric cables routed through it. So it gives it this very lovely, clean look.
I do wish that the handlebar was as clean as the old Java with the wires and cables all tucked away. But who can blame this motorcycle? You're in 2018 with electronics, the emissions, the safety systems, all of that. There's a whole lot of wires and plumbing running around, which is pretty hard to just make invisible, right? But on the whole, this new Java, well, it is strange how similar it is to the Java of old. Well, the stance is definitely striking. It's same as the Java of old. So is the headlamp design, the tank design, and even the side panels here. What I really find interesting though is the way the logos are used. It really reminds you of the older bikes. It's even there on the headlamp, the horn, and you know, to keep things clean and old school, even the handlebar lock is tucked away in here, and the ignition switch is down here. And if you look at the engine, yes, this is liquid cooled. You can see the radiator there, but it has all these fins, and the design for the crankcase is all to hark back to the old Java. For that classical look, there's also this knob here on the headlamp bezel, which is actually just a dummy now. It's not functional. And if you look at the cap for the fuel tank, it looks like a screw type fuel tank cap, but it's actually got a regular lock underneath it. Well, as you know, this Java has a sibling, the 42. It is mechanically identical. So, what sets it apart? Yes, it is cool and hip, but how? So we know they're mechanically the same. What's different are the aesthetics. You can see that the front fender, it's shorter, tighter, gives it that sportier look. The stays are different, which is why you'll find that these mounting points here on the fork sliders, well, these are the same as on the Java, and they're unused here because the fender's different. What else has changed? The headlamp. It's a smaller, tighter unit. And then you look at the speedo, which is set outside of it and offset over here. But the big difference between the two is this handlebar. It's lower and wider. Gives you a different, more aggressive stance. And if you're looking for modern day features, there's no LED anything on these. And the Speedo and Odo are just that. The LCD display seems a bit extravagant here, doesn't it? What else? Well, what could they have done better? Now, if you look at this motorcycle closely, you'll find that the weld seams are quite ungainly. The pinstriping isn't spot on. The needles for the speedo or the fuel gauge, they look a bit tacky. But Classic Legends tells us that these are pre-production prototypes, the final stage albeit, and these will be far, far better in production form. For instance, the robotic welding machines that they'll be getting will take care of the welds. And if I have to pay this Java a compliment right here, right now, irrespective of these shortcomings, I can say one thing: this feels sturdy. But if Jawa wants to impress us even further, it is going to have to bring its innovation A game to the table. Alan tells us why.
For a motorcycle that was made in 1967, it came packed with quite a few innovative features as well. Other innovations included an automatic clutch, a gear lever that doubled up as a kickstart, and automatic lubrication for the rear swing arm as well. And then we come to the front and rear wheels. They're both the same size, but they're also the exact same hub as well. So with just a little bit of modification, you could interchange the two if needed, and that allowed you to add a spare wheel as well. And that, for something from 1967, is quite incredible.
Well, this new age Jawa has none of that, but one thing it does share with the older bike is that it's a single-cylinder engine with 2 exhaust ports. And this might look like a straight-out exhaust, but actually it's a pipe that goes down into the catcon and then out to the exhaust. So this is just a dummy. And when you come to the pipe itself, Jawa tell us that inside that, the baffles are actually adjustable by 5 steps. So you could get the exhaust sound to be a bit louder if you wanted. Well, that's only a part of it. When you hear this bike whiz past you, the deep rumble really hits you. And talking about whizzing past, what is the performance expectation from a Jawa?
And if you're thinking 2-stroke power and you're thinking of bikes like the RX100 or the Suzuki Shogun, well, this 2-stroke was quite a bit of a long-stroke engine. So that means smooth, lazy power.
The modern day Jawas, be it the Jawa or the 42, pack the same 4-stroke liquid-cooled 293cc short-stroke engine. It has dual overhead cams, a compression ratio of 11:1, and it results in 27 PS of power. Well, now it can be said, this engine, although derived from the Mojo at some level, feels nothing like it. There's been extensive change made to the head so that it breathes differently, and that is all with the intention of making lots of torque low down in the rev range. It actually is super easy to use and will be a breeze commuting in the city. The re-engineered 6-speed gearbox also shines. It is smooth and precise. And if you decide to zip, you'll find that this engine lacks a little bit on the excitement front. It could have done with a bit more punch, especially considering the displacement and the tech that it uses. It isn't a simple air-cooled engine, right? But when you head out onto the highway, you'll find that it cruises at 90 kilometers an hour, which is its sweet spot. After that, it starts to feel a bit strange. Watch this. From standstill, an indicated 100 kilometers an hour comes up in 4th gear. But the 5th and 6th gears can't pull the speedometer much above 120 kph. The light buzz from the bar and the seat signals that the engine is at its limit. To put it simply, the Jawas can tour, but be prepared to work the gearbox for overtakes. Other than that, there are some rough edges. The current maps used on the Jawa aren't absolutely smooth. There are a few hiccups, but Classic Legends tells us that these will be ironed out as they get to the production stage. Now, for those of us who haven't had the opportunity to ride the older Jawas, we look at these old-timers as lazy and heavy, but that couldn't be further from the truth.
Coming back to those wheels again, they're 16 inches front and back. And if you notice, the motorcycle holds most of its weight quite low down. With this low seat height and those smaller wheels, you get really nice handling through corners. And even though, well, the engine wasn't quite performance oriented, around corners this was quite a lot of fun.
The Jawa isn't too adventurous on this front. The regular telescopic forks at the front hold up 18-inch rims that use 90 by 90 section rubber. At the rear, you've got dual shocks and 120 by 80 section rubber that's on 17-inch spoke rims. And holding it all together is a dual cradle frame. So is the result sportiness? Well, be prepared to be surprised. Now, if you decide to hustle the Jawa, you'll find that it is quite agile and involving. It could be accused of being a touch too responsive to steering inputs at times. But on the whole, this is a confidence-inspiring motorcycle and fun. And with that ABS brake at the front, it is well calibrated, gives you strong stopping power. And well, the rear, it's a drum brake. I do wish that it also had ABS on offer as standard right from the go.
Between the two bikes, it was the Jawa that felt more precise and more engaging to steer. The 42, because of the wider handlebar, felt a bit twitchy when steering into corners.
But this motorcycle is meant to be, well, more easygoing. So what does it feel like out on the highways? Well, before we get there, first thing you'll notice is that the seat height at 765mm is really nice and low. You've got 165mm of ground clearance, so it is pretty practical. Whether you have good roads or bad roads, you've got enough clearance. That aside, you have a long wheelbase, 1369mm, and that gives it a solid footprint. So even at higher speeds, this feels nice and confident. The one thing is the seat, which is really quite slim and firm, which is a good thing if you're into really doing long distances, but for shorter rides in the city, you'd wish that it was a bit on the softer side.
Also, tall riders will feel a bit cramped on the Jawas. But let me give the Jawa a compliment. The headlamp. It lights up the road beautifully. And now I'll give it a big compliment. Just look at this. The suspension is fantastic. These Jawas will be available from the upcoming 105 showrooms, and deliveries are expected to begin in March. So, should you wait?
Well, our expectations from the Jawa have been huge. And this motorcycle right here, it isn't perfect. I really wish it had a bit more punch so that it would be that much more exciting. And well, in terms of features, I do wish that there was rear ABS on offer right away. And the quality aspects that I've been assured will be fixed before this bike makes it to production. So as is here, what we have with the Jawa is a motorcycle that feels like a genuine, credible option for the many riders out there looking for something that has character and is yet easy to use on a daily basis. And well, is it a Jawa? From whatever we've learned of the Jawa, this certainly feels like it.
To put it simply, this looks like the start of something beautiful.